They thought humans were primitive, reckless, obsessed with games and songs. But when the first shots were fired, the galaxy learned a brutal truth. Humans don't just fight wars. They turn them into art, into puzzles, into symphonies of strategy and fury. They don't seek war, but when war finds them, it regrets it. This isn't just a story of weapons. It's the story of why you should never push a species that has spent its entire history preparing for the day peace fails. If you are new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move toward this wonderful story. The bar was quiet, tucked away in a dim corner of an old refueling station near the edges of Allied space. The lighting was soft and low, the kind that made you feel like secrets lived in every shadow. Alien voices murmured from scattered tables, and the gentle clink of glasses gave the room a kind of strange peace. That calm was interrupted when Tomai entered, tall, thin, antennae twitching with nervous energy. He was young, still fresh from university, and carried a recorder in one hand and a notepad in the other. He was on assignment for the Galactic Memory Project, collecting interviews with veterans from the Great Expansion War. Most refused to speak. But tonight, he had a name. Krevix. Krevix was hard to miss. The older alien sat hunched over his drink, his green and gold exoskin dulled with age. One eye implant flickered slightly. His outer shell bore the scars of combat, deep, jagged reminders of battles long past. Tomai approached slowly. "Captain Krevix?" he asked, voice steady but respectful. Krevix didn't look up at first. He took another sip of his drink, then said, "If you're looking for a glorious war story, kid, turn around." "I just want the truth," Tomai replied quietly. That made Krevix chuckle, a dry, rattling sound that echoed through his mandibles. He waved to the chair across from him. Tomai sat. "You want to know why we lost the war?" Krevix began, his voice thick with something between anger and sorrow. "It wasn't numbers. It wasn't tech. It wasn't even strategy. We lost because we were not ready for them. For the humans." Tomai blinked, unsure. "But surely our technology..." "Superior?" Krevix interrupted, eyes narrowing. "Sure, on paper. But humans don't fight on paper. They fight like they've got nothing to lose and everything to prove." He stared into his glass like it held the answers. "When we first met them, they were odd. They laughed too much. Their uniforms didn't match. They sang songs before battle. They played games when they should have been planning. We thought they were disorganized, weak, primitive." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Do you know what they did during our first skirmish? We sent fleets in perfect formation, patterns designed by our greatest battle AIs. Humans? They broke their own ships apart and used debris as cover. They dropped tungsten rods from orbit. No guidance, no tech, just gravity and metal. Wiped out half our command in one strike." Tomai frowned. "That's incredibly simple." "Exactly," Krevix said, tapping the table. "Simple, brutal, efficient, and completely unexpected. We thought we understood war. We had protocols, doctrine. They had imagination." He paused as if remembering something painful. "One time they were cornered, outgunned, outnumbered. We thought it was over. Then they set off their own reactors, blasted both fleets with an EMP, fried our systems. We were dead in space. You know what they did next?" He looked Tomai dead in the eye. "They launched boarding teams with fire and steel, not plasma, not energy blades, just hot metal cutting into hulls. I watched them burn through one of our ships and board it, all while singing." "Singing?" Tomai echoed. "Something about parachutes and death," Krevix muttered. "They have songs about dying horribly, and they sing them to get motivated. What kind of species does that?" The younger alien had no answer. He just kept listening as Krevix leaned back again. "And they don't stop at weapons," he continued. "They use everything. Data, stories, lies, rumors. They spread fear like it's a weapon. Half our soldiers surrendered because they believed humans could smell fear and would give you a clean death if you didn't fight back. But that's not true, Tomai said. No, it's not, Krivix agreed. But it worked. He shook his head slowly. We thought they were uncivilized because they still used projectile weapons and armor. We didn't realize that to them, everything is just another tool. Energy beams, steel knives, digital viruses. They use whatever works. No pride, no style, just results. The silence that followed was long. Finally, Tomai asked, what made them so different? They loved it, Krivix whispered, not the killing. Most of them hate that part. But the fight, the challenge, the strategy, they made war into a puzzle, a dance, an art form. He stood up slowly, bones clicking, then paused. One more thing, he said. If you ever see a human smiling during a fight, run. They're not smiling because they're confident. They're smiling because they've already figured out how to win. They just haven't finished it yet. Without another word, he left the bar, vanishing into the corridor shadows, like a ghost from a war no one wanted to remember. Tomai sat there for a long while, staring at his recorder, unsure if he had just heard the story of a defeat or the warning of a future. Marin had always thought of war as something chaotic, something to be avoided and feared. She had studied interstellar diplomacy on her homeworld of Telveth, where conflict was considered a failure of reason. When she was sent to Earth as part of a cultural exchange program, she didn't expect to spend her first week in a classroom learning about human military history. The title of the seminar, The Art of Chaos, sounded more like a warning than a lesson. Still, curiosity pulled her in. The room was filled with students from several different species, all seated in a semicircle around a human man with graying hair and a confident posture. His name was Jaro, and though he wore the plain clothes of a civilian, something in the way he moved suggested he'd once worn a uniform. He greeted everyone with a smile and a strange saying, "Let's dive into the deep end of the madness, shall we?" Jaro didn't start with famous battles or big victories. Instead, he showed images, snapshots of children playing a game where they captured flags, teams competing in something called paintball, and virtual screens filled with complex battle simulations. Marin was confused. "These are games," she said aloud. "This isn't war." Jaro grinned. "Not yet, but this is where it begins." He explained that unlike many species, humans grow up learning the rules of strategy without even knowing it. Through games, sports, and simulations, they teach themselves to adapt, to anticipate, and to improvise. By the time they're adults, Jaro said, a human has already spent thousands of hours thinking about tactics, even if it was just while playing video games. Marin shook her head. But games aren't real combat. Surely simulation can't replace experience. True, Jaro agreed, but that's the twist. Humans don't see simulation as replacement. They see it as rehearsal. He clicked a control and a new image filled the screen. An old battlefield log from a space conflict long ago. It showed a human fleet abandoning standard tactics mid-battle, breaking into uneven groups and performing a maneuver so unpredictable that the opposing force couldn't respond. The maneuver hadn't come from a military manual. It had come from a game. A young officer, inspired by something they'd once seen in a simulation, had applied it to real combat. And it worked. War, to them, Jaro said, is not about perfection. It's about possibility. That's what makes it so hard to fight them. Marin leaned forward, fascinated despite herself. But surely you can't just improvise your way to victory. Oh no, Jaro replied. Improvisation is just the top layer. Underneath it, humans build deep knowledge. They study history, psychology, physics. They combine hard science with gut feeling. They're like artists who know every color and brush, but still aren't afraid to throw paint on the wall just to see what happens. He showed footage from another battle. A small human scout ship, hopelessly outnumbered, had lured enemy ships into a dense asteroid field and then used controlled detonations to trigger debris showers, turning the environment into a weapon. It was desperate, dangerous, and brilliant. They don't just think outside the box, Jaro said. They forget the box exists. Marin stared at the screen, trying to understand. But why take so many risks? Because to them, Jaro said softly, risk is part of the game. They don't avoid it. They prepare for it. That's why they're so good at chaos. When everything goes wrong, that's when humans shine. He turned off the screen. The room went quiet. Then he said, there's one more thing you need to know. He paused long enough for everyone to lean in. Humans don't just fight to win. They fight to learn. Every loss teaches them something. Every mistake becomes a lesson. And they remember those lessons. Always. He took out a small object from his pocket, a medal dull with age. This wasn't awarded for victory. It was awarded for surviving a mistake and making sure no one else had to repeat it. Marin was silent for a long time. Her people had always seen war as something to be avoided, to keep in a box, separate from life. But for humans, it wasn't in a box. It was woven into everything. Games, stories, training, even childhood. She looked around at the human students. They didn't look like warriors. They were laughing, joking, sharing notes. But she remembered what Krevix had said about humans who smile before they strike. She began to understand now. Their strength didn't come from being the strongest or fastest. It came from how they thought. From their willingness to try, to fail, to try again. From their love of solving problems, even violent ones. Jaro looked at the group one last time. You've all heard that humans are dangerous. You've heard about our weapons, our ships, our history. But remember this. Our true power isn't in the firepower. It's in our ability to look at chaos and see a path through it. Marin left the room that day with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. The next time someone called humans reckless, she'd think of those children playing war for fun. And she'd remember that for humans, chaos wasn't the enemy. It was the canvas. The bar was alive with noise. Laughter echoed through the air. Glasses clinked together and music played from a worn-out jukebox in the corner. Humans were gathered at several tables, some arm wrestling, others playing card games, and a few singing a song about drinking on a ship. The place was cheerful, filled with warmth and light. Arisha, a young reporter from the planet Yellen, stood near the door with her notepad in hand, unsure if she should interrupt the moment. She was here to learn more about human culture for a series on peacekeeping traditions across species. So far, she had seen nothing that resembled the terrifying stories she'd heard about humanity's war history. These people didn't look like warriors. They looked like partygoers. She spotted a human man leaning against the bar with a calm smile and a glass of something brown in his hand. His name was Callan, a former fleet captain who had retired just a year before. She'd heard he was there during the Battle of Grell's Reach, one of the most intense conflicts of the Expansion War. Yet now, he laughed easily and greeted his friends with gentle slaps on the back. Are they always like this? Harisha asked, finally stepping closer. Callan turned to her. Like what? Happy? Loud? Singing? He chuckled. Only until the music stops. Before she could ask what that meant, a red light flashed over the bar's screen. The noise dropped instantly. The music cut off. Conversations froze mid-sentence. A silence heavier than gravity filled the room as the screen displayed a breaking news alert. A civilian transport ship had been attacked near the Karen Nebula. Not just any transport. A refugee vessel, carrying children. The transformation in the humans was instant. Smiles vanished, postures straightened. The warmth in their eyes turned cold. Arisha had never seen anything like it. One moment they were laughing. The next they looked like soldiers receiving orders. Callan's glass was already down on the counter. He was tapping rapidly on a device strapped to his wrist. How far from our position? He asked, not to Arisha, but to someone through his comms. Too far to intercept, a voice responded. But backup is mobilizing. More humans were now moving, calling contacts, exchanging data, coordinating routes. The bar had turned into a command post. Arisha stood frozen. She didn't understand how such joy could so quickly turn into such focused rage. Callan noticed her. Now you'll see it, he said. See what? What happens when the wrong line gets crossed? A A woman in civilian clothes approached their table. She had a simple look, no uniform, no medals, but moved like someone who had spent her life in command. "Status?" she asked. "Pirates hit a refugee ship. No official protection. Emergency beacons were delayed. Casualties confirmed," Callan reported quickly. The woman's jaw tightened. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. Arisha turned to her. "Why do they care so much? I mean, it's just a ship. One of many." The woman's expression darkened. It was full of children. "But it's not a declared war," Arisha said. "There are rules, procedures. We have those too," the woman said. "But there are some rules that are deeper than law. Some are written in our instincts. Protect the innocent, protect the young. When someone breaks those rules..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Another voice spoke up from across the room. "They're calling for volunteers. Intercept group launching from Sector 8. Hands shot up around the bar. Arisha's voice trembled slightly. "They're going to fight? Just like that?" Callan nodded. "They won't wait for orders. Not for this." "What if it's a trap?" "Doesn't matter." She couldn't understand it. Why would an entire group mobilize so quickly for people they didn't know? Why risk it? Why throw everything away for strangers? As if reading her mind, the woman said, "Because that's who we are. We don't need to know the names. It's enough to know they needed help. That's the only reason we need." On the screen, new reports began appearing. Multiple ships had diverted course toward the Charon Nebula. Not just human ships, others too. Yaren, Valari, even 2 vessels from the once neutral Tiran coalition. "They're coming," Callan whispered. "They remember." "Remember what?" Arisha asked. "There was another attack, years ago. Same kind of ship. We couldn't prove who did it, but we knew. So we waited, watched, planned. Now we finally have a reason to act." The coordination was staggering. Ships from different planets, different militaries, different cultures, all moving as one. It wasn't just a counterattack. It was justice with precision. "But they're not at war," Arisha whispered. "They are now." "The woman replied. "Only it won't look like one. It'll look like silence, speed, power, and the message will be clear. Don't cross the line." As the first human ships reached the nebula, offering the pirates a chance to surrender, Arisha realized what Callan meant earlier. The music had stopped, and when it did, the real humans stood up. Not just the cheerful ones, not just the loud ones, but the ones who had been preparing quietly, seriously, for exactly this moment. They weren't looking for a fight, but now that it had come, they would finish it. Together. The sky above Earth's capital shimmered with soft blue light as the shuttle descended. Trene, a young student from the planet Siren, stared out of the window, unsure of what to expect. He had come to study human diplomacy, but his mentor insisted he first visit the plains of memory, a place that honored not victories, but losses. Trene had read about human wars. He had heard stories of their power, their creativity in battle, and their strange relationship with conflict. But nothing had prepared him for what he was about to see. The plains were silent. Not because no one was there, visitors from every world walked its paths, but because silence seemed to rise naturally from the earth itself. The memorial stretched for kilometers. Stone walls polished to a deep black shine stood in rows, each carved with thousands of names. No titles, no ranks, just names. Waiting for Trene near the entrance was an older human in a faded uniform. His name was Renlo. His shoulders were bent with age, and his medals looked worn and quiet, as though they too remembered more than they wanted to. He gave Trene a respectful nod. "You came a long way," Renlo said. "I wanted to understand," Trene replied. "Why humans remember war this way?" Renlo led him along the path. "You've seen our ships, our tactics, our training. But this is the reason we fight the way we do." Trene looked at the names. Some were marked with flowers or handwritten notes. Others had small tokens resting at their base. Photos, medals, even children's drawings. You don't just honor victories, Trinette said quietly. No, Renlo agreed. We honor the people, the ones who paid the price. They walked in silence for a while. Then Renlo stopped and pulled something from his pocket, a small metal tag on a chain. My grandfather's, he said. He died during a war called World War II. He never spoke of his medals, only of the men he lost, the mistakes they made, the lessons they learned. Trinette turned to him. Why remember the mistakes? Renlo looked at the wall. Because, if we forget them, we'll repeat them. And because those mistakes cost lives. Every name here is a lesson, a warning. Further down the path, a group of young students from different species gathered around another human. This one was a woman, tall and quiet, dressed in civilian clothes. She answered their questions patiently, pointing to different sections of the wall. She's a fleet admiral, Renlo said. Retired now, spends her time teaching, not in classrooms here. Trinette asked, why teach about war through memories? Renlo smiled, but it was a sad smile. Because war isn't just about fighting. It's about what happens before and after. The decisions, the costs, the ones who don't come home. That's what they don't teach you in simulations. A small ceremony began nearby. No speeches, just a group of people standing in a circle, heads bowed. One of them placed a fresh nameplate at the base of the wall. A new addition? Trinette asked. Sometimes the war ends, Renlo said. But its effects don't. That name belonged to a medic who died last week. Injuries caught up with him. Took 20 years, but the war still claimed him. Trinette felt a chill. And, you still add them? We always do, Renlo said, because they matter, because they're part of the story. They continued walking. Eventually they came to a wide plaza where the wall curved inward. In the center stood a sculpture, a tree with no leaves, its branches twisted like reaching hands. Around its base were carvings in many languages, each one saying the same thing: never forget. Do humans really remember every war like this? Trinette asked. Not just remember, Renlo said. We carry them. How? In our stories, our songs, our families. You'll find poems about soldiers who never came home, paintings of battles long past, even our holidays. Some are just days to stop and remember. Trinette looked again at the wall. It wasn't just a memorial. It was a story told in pieces, carried by those who lived it and those who refused to let it be forgotten. I thought humans were dangerous because of how well you fight, Trinette said. We are, Renlo replied, but we're also dangerous because we remember why we fight, when to fight, and most importantly, when not to. They returned to the shuttle pad. Trinette turned back one last time, taking in the endless names. They didn't shout for attention. They whispered. Soft reminders that behind every strategy, every ship, every battle, there were people. People who laughed, cried, fought, and died. Renlo rested a hand on his shoulder. That's what makes us who we are. Not our weapons, not our speed, but our memory. Trinette nodded slowly. He had come to study diplomacy. But today, in silence among the weight of names, he had learned something far more important. The true strength of humanity didn't lie in how they fought wars. It lay in how they remembered them. And in the quiet promise they carried with them every time they stepped into battle, that they would never forget the cost.